4,000 years of Rama Avinu. Okay? What is the 4,000 years about? Either to mitzvahs, tshuva, yisurin. That's what it's about, right? That's what the Jews are trying to do. One or the other. And you have Golas and so on, to take back and so on, right? And finally we come to the end. The end of time is called the termination phase. It's called the termination phase. That's interesting. It's the end phase, you see. What is the termination phase? You ever go to a play? A play has, let's say, 3 acts, right? It has 3 acts, right? Because, and then in the 3rd act, you have what's called scene. Scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. The whole play is busy developing the plot, the character development, and so on. But in the end, scene 3 of act 3, right? The play is no longer interested in developing the plot. What the play wants to do, very interesting, is it wants to end the play, the climax, right? So therefore the focus of the last scene in the last act is, let's end it, right? Same idea. There's a concept called the termination phase. The termination phase is where God is no longer interested so much in getting the Jews to do the tikkun, because the tikkun is 98% finished. Now what God wants to do is bring the Mashiach to end the whole thing. And that's the termination phase. It means that the tikkun is almost done. Now, that termination phase has 3 subphases. One is called the Ikvis de Mashiach, the footsteps of the Messiah. What does that mean? Is that we're so close that if the Mashiach was in front of us walking and he leaves in the mud his footsteps, after time it wears away. But we're so close behind him that we can actually see his footsteps. That's called the footsteps of the Messiah. Very close. The second phase, subphase, is called Aschalta de Geula, the beginning of redemption. That takes time. And the third subphase is called Yemois HaMashiach, the Messianic era. That's it. That's what we're all waiting for, okay? But what I want to do, as you will see now, is to show you basically where we are in this whole process, now that you understand the different phases. There's a lot of ideas and details, but basically, the Ikvis de Mashiach, which is the beginning of the termination phase, started in 1840. 1840. It's based on a Zohar. What does the Zohar says? The Zohar says a very interesting concept, and then what it alludes to. The Zohar, which of course I'm sure you ever heard, it's the textbook of Kabbalah, of the mystical aspect of Judaism. The Zohar says that, it says by Noach, by the flood, in the 600th year of the life of Noach, okay, then the flood happened, right? The waters of heaven, the waters of the earth poured forth, and the windows of heaven opened up and outpoured the water. Fine. So the Zohar says that from here we learn that in the 600th year, just like by Noach, in the 600th year of the last tekufa, of the end of time, which is 5,600, the waters will pour forth, which means that there will be an incredible hispashtus chokhmah, incredible pouring forth of wisdom, without going into why, okay? And that, obviously, 1840 is 5,600. It is the 600th year of the 5,000th year, okay, which I will explain shortly. So that means in 5,600, which is 1840, there will come down an incredible amount of wisdom on the earth. What happened in 1840? Just think about it. The Industrial Revolution, science, Michael Faraday, then you had all the, physics and chemistry. The amount of discoveries that started from about 1840, it all started then. It's incredible what happened. And that's exactly what happened. Tremendous Hispashtus Chokhmah, a revelation of an enormous amount of wisdom came back. In fact, mankind changed radically from 1840, if you really begin to think about it and so on, So that's basically when it started, the concept of 1840, and we learned that from the Zohar of Noach. What does that mean? It means that we're near the end. Once that starts, if this type of wisdom comes down, next week actually I'm going to talk about that. But what it means is that there's an incredible amount of divine wisdom that comes down, which is really the beginning of the Messianic light, which I will explain next week, what that really means. In fact, I'll explain what science is really all about. And what does it have to do with the Messiah, the Mashiach himself. But anyway, the main idea is that we're near the end, which means that the Satan has to give up most of his energy, and he's dying, because that's what it means. And therefore we are very close to the end. Now, let me tell you this, which is very important. If Jews have to suffer in order to do the third tikkun device, there are only 8 nations that can make them suffer. That's it. And for them it's great. Not because they want to make Jews suffer, which also happens to be true, but the idea is because God said that these 8 nations that I'm going to appoint to make the Jews suffer, I'm not just going to give my Jews, my people, my children to some lowly nation. I'm not going to have them go to Zimbabwe, right, and suffer from the Zimbabweans, right? No, because the indignity is too great. The nations that I'm going to give that will allow, I hope I don't insult the Zimbabweans, but anyway, I take it back. Anyway, you know what I'm going to do? Every nation that I give, that will be my agents to bring suffering on the Jews, because that's the third tikkun device, I'm going to make them to a world power. Okay, still suffering in different ways. There's persecutions, there's also assimilation, whatever, and so on. But at least it's a world power, so you can walk around with your head a little high. In any case, who are these 8 nations? Who are they? And they are the following. 1, Egypt was the first. Mitzrayim, that was the first, number 1. Second, and each one is different, and so on. The second one is Babylon, Bavel. They destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. I mean, Mitzrayim was the Shibud Mitzrayim, right? There was slaves in Egypt, right? Bavel destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, and Jews moved to Bavel with Daniel and so on, Nebuchadnezzar. That's the second. The third nation is Porus, Persia. Persia, of course, they had Haman, Achashverosh, and so on, right? The fourth nation is Yavan, Greece. And Greece, of course, is Hanukkah, what the Greeks did and so on. The fifth nation is Rome. Rome. Beis HaMikdash, Second Temple, and so on. So there are 5 nations. I will mention the other 3 because they really come at the end of time. And I'm going to go much more heavy into 2 of them. Okay. The other 3 nations are Yishmael, the Arabs, or the Muslims. The 7th nation is Amalek, the Amalekites, whoever they are today, which is very interesting, because Amalek isn't a nation, they are long ago assimilated. But Amalek, whoever has the characteristics of Amalek, which is unmitigated arrogance, and I'll talk a little about that, who that is. But and then the last nation, the 8th nation, isn't really a nation, it's the Jews. Like it says in the prophet, from within you will come your destroyers. It's a famous Navi and so on, That's called the Erev Rav, okay? The Erev Rav are Jews that want to destroy, not Jews, Judaism, which I will talk about, okay? And that's a Navi. From within you will come your destroyers, which means that the Jews themselves, although not a real nation, but they are a segment of Jews, of course, that are really very bad, especially in the end of time. Now, I want to go into, each one of these have distinct characteristics which the Jews has to go through and whatever, be under their jurisdiction and dominion and so on, and suffer and so on. I'm going to go into Esav and the Erev Rav, a little more, and Yishmael. Actually, those are the 3. Okay.